There are these points in time when you try to share something real or heavy, genuine with someone that you trust. And in the middle of that conversation, you can feel the energy shift. Just a subtle shift in their energy. They might they might respond to you too quickly, a real quick retort, quick response, or there is a redirect of the conversation or the question, and you kind of see it in their eyes, you see it in their face. It just wasn't there a minute ago during the conversation, and you feel it. So you stop. You recognize in that moment that you can't go there, so you fold the rest of it back in, and you bring that conversation back to the surface, and you file it away somewhere in your mental Rolodex, and you keep it moving. We understand that not everyone has the capacity at some point or another. So if this happens once or twice, we chalk it to that. But if it continues to happen, you've got to stop and ask why. Not just why can't they meet me here, but you have to consider as well what kind of can't this is. And that's because the answer isn't always the same. And knowing the difference changes how you carry it. Sometimes that person across from you is just simply full. They're not empty of care. They're not lacking in love for you. They're just carrying too much on their own right now, and they don't have the space for yours. They are dealing with their own unprocessed weight, and they're barely keeping up with life, with what life is already asking of them. So when someone is that full, even someone who genuinely loves you, there's just no bandwidth. And again, that's not because of who you are, and it's not because of what you're sharing. It's because they are already underwater with something of their own. And if we're real with ourselves, we've been that person at one time or another too. When someone has reached out to you and you could feel yourself not being able to get there. And it's not because you don't care, but it's because that you at that time were carrying more than you could handle, more than you could hold. Bandwidth is not a character trait, and it's not about how much someone loves you, because it shifts. It's situational, and it can be seasonal in our lives. Because the person that can't meet you today might be exactly the person who holds you completely when they've put something of their own down. This particular kind of can't asks for patience and the willingness to play the long game. But there is another kind, and it does feel different. Some people, they simply don't go where you go. And again, it's not because they're broken, and it's not because they don't care about you, but it's because their depth doesn't reach where yours does. They live a little closer to the surface, and they process differently. And no amount of waiting is going to change that. You can feel that difference if you pay attention. Because bandwidth feels like not right now. This feels like not ever. Like the room that you're looking for, the space that you're looking for, the depth that you're looking for doesn't exist within this person, regardless of the season they're in. And that's not indicative of a failure, not on your part or not on their part. It just simply means that that person is not for you in this situation. And the sooner that you know that, really know that, is the sooner you stop measuring yourself against their inability to receive you as if it says something about your worth. Because it doesn't. And then there is a third kind. And this one requires something different entirely. Not patience and not acceptance. It requires discernment. Because there are some people that you should simply not be sharing yourself with. And it's not due to bandwidth. It's not due to depth. But it's because there's something in you that already knows this person is not for your highest good. Maybe it's the way your words get used against you later, or how in the way you feel smaller after you've had conversations with them than you did before it. And sometimes it's just something that you just can't fully put your finger on. You just kind of know that what you share here doesn't get held here. And you still share because you want connection. Because you might be hoping that this time it'll be different. Or because closing that door on that person feels lonelier than the risk of opening it. But you got to know this particular kind asks the most of you. It asks you to choose yourself over the comfort of being known, even imperfectly, at a cost. And this is where discernment lives. Not in those obvious betrayals, not in those moments, not in those loud moments, in those quiet ones, the ones where something in you already knows it, and you're still deciding whether to listen to it. Discernment is the practice of taking that knowing seriously, of not just asking, can this person hold me? But are they actually for me? Not that reasoning kind of thing where you say, oh, do they mean well? Or do they love me in their own way? Not that. Are they for me? That's a different question. And it requires a different kind of honesty. Because you can spend years pouring yourself into spaces that were never going to honor what you brought. And it's not because you're foolish, but it's because you wanted it to be different more than you were willing to hear what you already knew. So through all of it, the full ones, the shallow ones, the ones you should have left sooner. What you're really learning is something that takes a long time to understand. Not just who can hold you, but how to hold yourself. And something else, something worth sitting with is when the room shifts and you fold the rest of it back in. Before you file it away, before you move on, and you got to ask yourself, why was I trying to get that out? And this is not in judgment. And this is not, I'm not criticizing one for reaching, just as a genuine curiosity. Was it to unload something that was heavy? Was it just to speak with and commiserate with someone who might understand? Were you asking for advice and you weren't really sure how to ask for it directly? Maybe just to be witnessed in something that had been sitting in you for too long. Sometimes you just want to talk out loud with someone that you trust. Because knowing why you're reaching tells you something important. It tells you in a real soft and subtle way what you actually need. And once you know what you actually need, the question kind of shifts. Because if not there, where? Not why can't they hold this? Not what's wrong with me for feeling this way. Where? Because the need is real. The reaching was real. What you were trying to release is very real. And it deserves somewhere to go. Maybe it's the page, to write it out. Maybe it's in movement, dancing, exercise, whatever. Maybe it needs to come out in making something, your art, sounds, words, anything that takes what's inside of you and gives it a form outside of you. Maybe you just need to go inward first before going outward at all. Sitting with that long enough to understand what it is before you hand it to someone else to hold with you. And this is where resourcefulness lives. Not that the grind kind of resourcefulness. It's the kind of resourcefulness that recognizes and says, I know what I carry. I know what I need. And I'm not without options just because this particular door wasn't the right one right now. You stop abandoning what you carry just because the expected outlet wasn't available. You're not measuring yourself against someone else's inability to receive you. And you just start trusting your own knowing. You start trusting it before you even have evidence, to have that physical evidence to confirm it. And as you do that, you become your own first witness. Not the only one, not forever, but that consistent one who is always there, even when the room shifts. So you've got to give yourself the kind of reception you've been waiting for someone else to offer. And that's not settling. That is the foundation that everything else gets built on. So sit with yourself there and continue traveling.